anti-war meeting in 1944. And it's a very funny story. The captain of the Home Guard turns up to the meeting thinking that it's basically going to be peaceniks and soggy liberals and a couple of students. It's outside of one of the major department points, a huge armed barracks up in the northeast. Attacks the speaker, is given a mouthful from the audience and doesn't quite understand the dynamic because at the end of the day, these are just idiot peacenik, the parents of the hippie generation to come. Goes down to the local park, comes back with a full regiment of a platoon of Home Guard types, and these are essentially, go too far with this, but these are guys in their mid to late 40s, 50s, semi-retired types with shovels and pickaxes to attack the meeting. What happens is when they attack the meeting that Ray's in, they are swiftly dealt with in no uncertain terms by a crowd of 30 to 40 young men in civilian clothes who have just been trained in close quarters combat. What happened was that the meeting was dominated by soldiers, young soldiers, who were sitting there for a couple of hours listening to a whole series of arguments against the war. And this was a common case. It's a case that we don't really hear about. In the middle of the war, where the penalty for being a soldier of going to a meeting was, beyond the extreme. It could actually result, if you were found to be mutinous, in the death penalty. That history is completely hidden from view, and Ray's book does a fantastic job of showing how the class divide in British society was amplified, not reduced, during the war, and how the risks taken by those who opposed the war, including the penetration of, like I say, communist anarchist ideas into the armed forces, was incredibly successful. They're also individual
people behind you. I think they might want to come in.
They're also individual. The one last example I'll give from the book is the individual case of George Armstrong, which again, cutting with Ray's overarching theme, was a case of the first British citizen who was hanged for sedition during the war, and Ray brilliantly documents the miscarriage of justice. He also documents how the secret state, the part of what became MI5 and MI6 that's portrayed in the popular narrative of the war as, outward-facing, uncovering Nazi agents, fighting on the home front to make sure that Hitler's agents were ineffective, were actually focused on internal dissent and opposition. So George Armstrong's case shows the extent to which the resources that were applied in Britain and internationally. You had MI5 officers travelling to places like Baltimore and Boston to attend mass meetings that were against the war organised by soldiers and dock workers and sailors. And again, Ray does a brilliant job in showing just how much of that resource, that internal secret state, was applied internally to the British population. With, in George Armstrong's case, the consequence that he was hanged. And then finally, there are the case that comes out of Ray's general political position of how tragic the twists and turns that were imposed on the communist parties in Europe, both immediately prior to and during the Second World War, had devastating consequences on the opposition inside. So that thin layer of opponents to the war, both before, during, and after, was crippled effectively by the twists and turns that the Stalinist communist parties were forced to make in the centre in that period. So it's a great book. There's tons in there. There's a lovely quote from Robert Coulon, who was the French ambassador to Berlin after the Hitler-Stalin Pact was signed. 2 days after the Hitler-Stalin Pact was signed, peace agreement between Stalin's Russia and Hitler's Germany. Robert Coulon goes in to meet Hitler and says, we have to get this right. But he speaks to Hitler and he says, the real victor in the case of war will be Trotsky. Have you thought that over? And Hitler says, I know. And it's that promise, unrealised unfortunately, of the opposition both to the tyranny that was then happening in Russia and Eastern Europe and in the West, that Ray's entire life was spent combating, and it's a very inspiring book for socialism.